20 years ago today, on June 7th, 1999, marked one of the worst and most disappointing and underwhelming storyline reveals in all of WWE history. One of the very few times that they disappointed us during the Attitude Era. This, of course, was the Greater Power reveal that was incorporated into The Undertaker's new gimmick, the Ministry of Darkness, which then morphed into the Corporate Ministry. And we had this big higher power to be revealed on Monday Night Raw that was built up for weeks. The Undertaker, the leader of his own ministry, is answering to a greater power. He's answering to someone else. There's someone else pulling the strings in charge of the ministry. And my God, was that a fun fucking time to be a wrestling fan. I remember this shit like it was yesterday. There was so much going on, and this was a really convoluted angle, and it started out really great. And I thought it was going to turn out to be one of the greatest angles in WWE history, and it turned out to be really the opposite of that. A couple of interesting notes, too, about this Monday Night Raw on June 7th. This was the first live Monday Night Raw since the Owen Hart tribute show. Because Owen Hart died at Over the Edge. The next night, they did the Owen tribute show, and back in those days, that was when they were doing taped Raws every other week. So that means the night after the Owen show, they taped Raw again on Tuesday to be aired the following week, and that's when everybody had off to go to Owen Hart's funeral. And it wasn't until they came back live for the first week that they did the higher power reveal on Monday Night Raw, and it opened up the show. Now, just a little bit of a backstory here for those who might not remember or weren't watching wrestling around this time. If you have not, pull up some of these Raws on the WWE Network prior and throughout the time period of WrestleMania 15, somewhere around maybe February, March, and into early May, late May. That's when a lot of this ministry angle got cooking. And Vince McMahon, who had been feuding so viciously with Stone Cold Steve Austin, you know, they had the feud of the century the year prior. And now we're moving into WrestleMania 15, and Vince just cannot slay this rattlesnake. And he beats The Rock at WrestleMania 15, wins again. Vince McMahon is distraught, but at the same time, he almost kind of like gives up. Even at Backlash 1999, he almost half-assed turned babyface. He just gave Austin the belt, didn't try to interfere in his match, basically just gave up and said, I cannot beat this guy. Right around the same time that The Undertaker started fucking with Vince McMahon. Now, The Undertaker had also taken a hiatus. He had lost, I think, to Austin in a Buried Alive match or something like that. He lost in late 98 to Austin, and he was kind of gone for a while. And when he returned, he had tweaked up his character a little bit. And I loved it because I was really not a fan of mid to late 1998 Undertaker. Because WWE was moving into the Attitude Era and things were getting a little bit more realistic in storyline, which means this dead man persona of The Undertaker gets a little hokey for that time period, for the demographic that pro wrestling was targeting at that time. So The Undertaker, if you notice, around mid-98, in his feud with Austin going into SummerSlam that year, he started to get a little bit more real on the mic, started talking a little bit more like a real person instead of this rest in peace shit, you know what I mean? And I remember not really liking it. I liked the more ominous Undertaker because I was just an old school fan. I loved that gimmick. So when 1999 rolled around and he returned from that brief hiatus and he kind of started doing this dark shit, this like satanic shit. Next thing you know, he's sacrificing Midian, and he starts doing really creepy shit like fucking with the McMahon family. Burns the Undertaker symbol outside their house. He grabs that teddy bear. I think they had like an Inferno match on Raw. Great moment on Raw. One of my favorites ever. Undertaker grabs the teddy bear, lights it on fire, and hands it to Vince McMahon, who's in the aisleway, like on his knees, crying. And we were guessing at the time that that was Stephanie's teddy bear, and Undertaker had taken it from the house. And the bear had sentimental value, and it just sat there, and it burned, and it was great. I was marking out like crazy as a fan back then during this because I thought it was awesome. And I loved to see this side of The Undertaker. You didn't even know who to root for because Vince McMahon was such a dastardly heel. You wanted to see horrible things happen to him, but some of the stuff was seemingly crossing the line. And then Stephanie McMahon went missing. They couldn't find her for some reason on Monday Night Raw until finally she was discovered in like a boiler room or whatever it was. And then I think it was after Backlash, I forgot what pay-per-view, and that's when Stephanie gets in the back of the limo and The Undertaker is driving and she screams and the pay-per-view goes off the air. So poor Stephanie was tormented by The Undertaker. And then on Monday Night Raw, Vince McMahon has to actually ask, he has to plead and go to Austin for help, which I thought was interesting because these two were such bitter rivals. But Vince's daughter is like missing and he needs Austin's help. I can't remember what the storyline was. Was it a ransom or was she missing? I forgot what it was. But he goes to Austin for help, and that's the Monday Night Raw where they tie Stephanie to the big Undertaker cross or Undertaker symbol, and they're about to fucking crucify her, much like they did Austin on the stage in that great Monday Night Raw segment that I fucking loved. So now they got Stephanie on this thing, and they're tying her up, and I don't remember what Paul Bearer was doing, if he was trying to marry Stephanie to Undertaker or sacrifice her to some gods, or I don't know what the fuck was going on there, but it was awesome and creepy and dark and scary. And then finally, Austin's music hit. He comes out there, saves Stephanie McMahon, and that's when Vince is like, thank you, Steve. You know, he's in Steve's debt now. I thought that was kind of an intriguing storyline because Stone Cold made it clear that he was not helping Vince McMahon. He was just not going to let an innocent girl be harmed like this. So he's like, I didn't do it for you kind of thing. Even when it was a great moment when Stephanie like hugged Steve in the ring and he kind of had his arms out like he didn't want to hug her back. You know, he just did the right thing. He didn't even really want to do it, but he had to do it type of shit. So I liked all of that. So they start with this higher power nonsense or greater power. And, you know, that's actually, I should say this real quick. This is like one of those Mandela effect things, because for my whole life, every time I refer back to this segment, I always thought it was called the higher power. But anywhere you look online, when you research this storyline, it's called the greater power. And I thought they might have called it both, but in my head, I always thought it was higher power. Anyway, I don't know. That's the way I remember it. But everybody refers to it now as the greater power. So that's what I'm calling it. But they started referring to this greater power on TV. And you started wondering, the speculation was all over the place. And it's so funny how many times we've been let down with situations like this. Whenever there's like a whodunit type of thing, who ran over Austin, who's in the limo in WCW, shit like that. Whenever there's this long build, this long reveal, oh my God, who can it be? More often than not, it feels like we are let down. And this is one of those occasions. And like I said, it's one of the few times in the Attitude Era that we were actually let down as an audience. But they did. They failed miserably here. Now, I don't know what the Torch and the Observer were reporting around this time, but I remember thinking that this must have been a situation like so many others, like Austin being run over with the car, that they have an idea in mind, but they don't know what the result is going to be. And anytime you have that, the result usually turns out to be a letdown. I don't know from the minute the greater power was announced or teased on TV that Vince McMahon was the person they had in mind. I could be wrong on that, but it doesn't seem to be the original idea. And I remember the speculation was so fun. There was 4 big names that were being rumored around that time, and all of them had previous history with The Undertaker. Number 1 was Jake the Snake Roberts. Now, Jake was in a real bad way around 99. He would not have been able to come in his condition and do anything, but he would have been a great choice. Another one was actually the Ultimate Warrior. I remember that being tossed around. Also, Brother Love. Brother Love originally brought Undertaker into the WWE, so they thought maybe it could be Brother Love or the other guy that was responsible for bringing Undertaker into the WWE, Ted DiBiase. I specifically remember his name being tossed around, even though I'm pretty sure at that time he was still in WCW. Although it would make sense, because I do believe he left around May of 96. So if he did sign a 3-year deal over there and it was up, he might have been heading back. I don't remember where DiBiase was around June of 99, but I remember his name being tossed around as an idea for the higher power. So we thought it was going to be somebody awesome. We thought it was going to be somebody from the past, somebody from Undertaker's past, just somebody cool in general. So they build and build and build to this. Finally, they're going to announce and reveal the higher power to open up Monday Night Raw on June 7th. So the show opens up with Vince McMahon coming out there in his street clothes, because by this point, Vince is pretty much a babyface. He has formed that Union faction, and he is at odds against the corporate ministry. Undertaker's ministry wound up merging with Shane McMahon's corporation when Vince was kicked out of it, and I think The Rock was kicked out of it. And so now you have the corporate ministry, which I don't know about you guys, but I absolutely loved that corporate ministry mashup theme that they did. I thought that was great. I mean, I love the Undertaker's ministry music, but I really liked the mashup. I thought it sounded great. So I was still not soured on the ministry yet. I think the ministry, the way it was going in that dark satanic way, I think the first mistake was merging with the corporation and becoming the corporate ministry. I was still okay with it, and I was still into it, just not as much as I was when it was just a regular ministry raising hell. And then they really let us down. Like I said, they open up Monday Night Raw. Vince is in the ring. He's on the mic. He says that he's going to go one-on-one in this very ring with the higher power later on tonight. And he's going to go to the back and he's going to watch who they reveal as the higher power. So Vince talks for a couple of minutes. He goes back. They go to commercial. They come back and out comes the corporate ministry. And I think it's Shane McMahon who does most of the talking here. And he announces or he introduces the higher power. The higher power comes out in a red velvet druid cloak type of thing. You can't see his face. Although on the WWE Network, I believe you can because the resolution is a lot better. I actually rewatched this segment on my original USA Network recording of this Monday Night Raw because I recorded every single week back then. So I have all of that, those files accessed on my computer. So I actually watched the original just to see if there's anything I caught, between the two, if there's a difference in the editing or anything like that. And one thing I did notice on the WWE Network version is that you can see under the hood and see Vince's face. But on the version that I have recorded in my own collection, it's impossible because there was no HD back then. So anyway, Vince walks down to the ring. They've got that weird kind of music playing as he comes down. And he just gets in the ring and stands there. And now all of a sudden you start narrowing down in your head who it is because now you can see the size of this person. And I remember watching this on TV. I have vivid memories. I have a funny story about this night, actually. I'm watching that on TV and I'm looking at him. I'm like, who could that be? He's too small to be Jake, too small to be Warrior. Definitely doesn't look like Brother Love. Maybe it could be DiBiase. And then he takes off the hood and it's the famous, "It's me, Austin. It was me all along." And you gotta be kidding me. Even JR was like, son of a bitch. I think he echoed the frustration of the fans. I remember being so let down by this because I wanted to see someone cool be revealed. I wanted to see someone new or a face from the past or somebody returning to the company. That was always fun. This is right in the middle of the Monday Night Wars. It's fun when somebody jumps ship. So I wanted to see someone from the other side come over or just someone that we used to know type of thing. That's what I was hoping for. And boy, did I get let down here. Vince McMahon goes on to say that he fooled everybody and he made fools of all of us. And all I could think about is that this makes no storyline sense. If this were to happen today, we would be freaking out because it really did make no storyline sense. That means the minute Vince McMahon took off that hood, that means he orchestrated all of that shit with his family and Stephanie's abduction and all that crap. And the whole thing was a ruse. The burning teddy bear and the home invasion and all this shit was a ruse? Like, that's stupid, man. What I think this was more a case of is that WWE didn't have anybody. They didn't come up with any good person to be the higher power. So they were like, well, let's just make it Vince. Would be my guess there. Like I said, I have to go back and read the sheets to see what they were saying back then. But that's the way it appeared to me, is that they began this angle without knowing what the payoff was going to be. And when that happens, more often than not, it sucks. However, this was one of the longest Monday Night Raw segments in history. I mean, it kept going. So that was our big disappointment there. But then it got better because prior to the higher power reveal, before they went to commercial break, they cut backstage to Steve Austin, who's standing next to a limousine with the door open and he's talking inside of the limousine. So you knew someone was there. And then after Vince and Shane laugh at the whole audience for how they fooled them, you see Stephanie and Linda come out to the stage. Now, Stephanie had not been on TV much, only a couple of times. Linda was on TV maybe a couple of times as well, but not often. The fans were really not used to them. And Stephanie is saying, how can you be so cruel to me? And Vince is like, we weren't trying to hurt you. We love you and all of that. And Linda calls him out on his bullshit. Fuck off, Vince. I can't believe you did this to your family. And by the way, when you sit there and tell everybody that you and Shane own 50% each of the company, that's horseshit. You only own 25% each, and Stephanie and I own 25% each too. And we have turned over our shares to a new CEO. We called an emergency board meeting today, and now there is a new 50% stake owner in the company and a new CEO, Stone Cold Steve Austin. The crowd explodes. At that moment, when he walked out there wearing that red tie around his neck, my phone rang. The girl I was seeing at the time was not a big wrestling fan, but she knew that I was. She tolerated it, didn't really mind or anything like that, but she really wasn't a big fan. But she was at her own house watching Raw. She was watching this whole segment, and called me and she goes, "Are you watching this?" And I'm like, "Of course I'm watching this. Why the fuck are you watching this?" And she goes, "I was channel surfing and it was on and I started to watch it because I knew you were home watching it." So I remember that specifically because it was so funny. Even a non-wrestling fan thought this was a great segment and extremely entertaining. And the minute Austin walked out with that tie, wrestling fan or no wrestling fan, I think the entire world would have been entertained by a moment like that. And Austin now, it's another one of those weird storylines. I don't know how many times they've done this too. They did it with Flair and they did it with some other people where Vince's ownership is up for grabs and shit in the company. This was like the first time they tried this and it was kind of out of left field. Now you've got Austin walking around there as half owner. He makes a whole bunch of matches for that night on Monday Night Raw. That was right when The Rock turned babyface and Triple H turned heel. So they had recently swapped and Austin booked a cast match. They put Triple H's leg in a cast and put him in the ring with The Rock. He booked a handicap match and a couple of other matches for Raw and also announced that at the King of the Ring, a show that I was at, the chair sits in the background of my live streams on YouTube. He announces a match where it's going to be Austin versus Vince and Shane in a handicap match at King of the Ring. And I think that would eventually turn into the ladder match where they put the briefcase and they put the ownership of the company on the line. And that whole deal, I think that would happen, and that stip would be added maybe in the next week or so on TV. And after all of this went down, something like 40 minutes had passed on Monday Night Raw with only that one commercial break after the Vince McMahon promo. Had this been 2019, there would have been 4 commercial breaks in there, and it would have been a mess. But all in all, when you look back at this segment, I can remember being so disappointed about the Greater Power reveal, but at the same time entertained by the segment as a whole because it had so many ups and downs. Like the speculation and the suspense of who's it going to be. And then we get let down so massively by Vince McMahon. And you're like saying to yourself, holy shit, this makes no storyline sense. Now we're right back to this heel Mr. McMahon, something we've been doing forever. So we have this massive disappointment. But then it takes a turn with Stephanie and Linda coming out announcing that the biggest babyface in all of professional wrestling is now half owner of the company. So it was still a lot of fun. The segment was completely bonkers and out there, and it's really a perfect example of how fun the Attitude Era could be and how much was dedicated to a lot of these segments and how much was going on here. You know, even though the higher power, the greater power was a disappointment, when you look at this 40-minute long segment and all of the different things they did, you know, the crowd was on the edge of their seat, marking out, reacting to everything. You don't see that now at all. You know, so that's why some of these Raws are so fun to go back and watch. So if you've never familiarized yourself with the Ministry of Darkness or the Corporate Ministry or the Greater Power or the Vince McMahon reveal, take a look back at some of these Monday Night Raws between the months of March and June, and you'll probably find them pretty entertaining. So thanks again for joining me on another This Day in History. Y'all be good. I'll talk to you soon. Peace.